All right, we're here for game 3 of Deli vs. Seto, Delta Bowl. I missed game 1. Game 2 was excellent. Go check it out. Very interesting game. Uh, very nice survival by Deli. Really optimal pressure from Seto. Just one of those games where you're like, yeah, this is perfect play and shows some concepts really nicely. Okay, what's going on here? Seto has played a side starter where he does have the recaptures in 1 and 3 because there's no plus wall. I know rules. I can remember things for 7 seconds sometimes. Okay, so this is clearly a defensive side. Deli can take safety because you may notice Seto only has 3s facing up. I wonder if there's some goofy way to sweep that. Like, you could imagine a hilarious, in my opinion, hilarious, T. No, he doesn't have a sweeper. Eh. Where because they're the 2s facing out, yeah, okay, whatever. So this is a defensive side. I like aggressive sides, as I talked about last game, but defensive sides are obviously very viable as well. So, what's Deli's most natural L? I don't think he has a super great one. He can play, something like 2 6 6 6 and say 3, and then follow up with 5 5 1 6 in 6, setting up a nice plus in 5. Seto also has that plus if he has kept 3 3 7 4, which he wouldn't that line. He would have played 3 5 7 1 and 1. Then Deli can play 9, but Seto can capture from 8. And probably Seto is left with 3 5 2 7 as card at the end there. But he's up 6 4, so you flip something. 3 5 7 2 is kind of dead, and the score is 4 and 7. It looks headed for a tie. I think that's the line you play if you're like, I am happy to just make a tie here. Because I think it probably just makes a tie, right? I don't know that there's too much deviance along that line. There is the possibility of setting something up in 4 instead of 6. But 3 3 7 4 still means your opponent shares it, and your combo's a little less comfortable. You have to check things more closely, because 5 5 1 6, of course, overpowers a 5, so there's more potential to be comboed back. But I suspect that is quite pleasantly, slightly second turn favored, but it's just a tie as well. Yeah, there's not a setup I think is spectacular. Now, Deli sometimes does weirdo stuff. I think because the L's aren't that spectacular and because they're all shared, 4 and 6 are probably not that appealing, especially because Seto's has 7s to the sides. But maybe that's the way of taking advantage of Seto's up. No, because Seto always has 5 there. It's not a problem for him. Okay, so I think 1 and 3 are better than 4 and 6. I'm always lazy about checking 7 and 9, but I'm sure there are decent moves in 7 and 9. One appealing thing about going in 1 rather than 3 is it can force 3 3 7 4 out of the opponent's hand rather than 3 5 7 1. And that might make it better. Yeah, that might make it. Maybe that's where the best pressure is. You play something like 2 6 6 3 and 1, probably oblige 3 3 7 4 and 3, and then you play something like 3 5 3 6 in 5 in 4, setting up a threat in 5, and if they should take that from 5, you have safety taken back in 7. They may have to block 5 because you have a threat there. In which case, you have to check stuff, but I imagine you hold. Maybe you don't. Maybe they have a good way to block 5 there. But I think 2 6 6 3 and 1 is. I probably just play 3. Okay, he goes 1. This is the more ambitious move. I think 3 is the version where I'm just like, I'm gonna make a tie, and 1 is the version of like, I will create something a little more difficult for you because I'm gonna force you to keep slightly clumsier cards in your hand. The line I'm worried about is if 3 3 7 4 and 3, 3 5 3 6 and 4. Oh, maybe you do 5 5 2 5. Maybe it's easy if you do 5 5 2 5. Yeah, it's probably 5 5 2 5 and 4. Because I was thinking there were some end games. The line I was looking at was 3 5 3 6 and 4, Seto plays something like 3-7-5-3 and 5. She'll note doesn't set you up in 6. And if you go 7, Seto can take it with 3-5-2-7. And 3-5-7-1 is actually a sufficient up-down sweeper to win that endgame, unless I just can't count and you have more flips than I thought. But part of that is because 5-5-2-5 is not a great card to still have in your hand. So maybe a 5-5-2-5 and 4 is the key way to set up the L here. I don't know if Seto has a ton of choices besides 3. I'm sure he's either checking 3 extensively or looking at something else, but I think this move is somewhat obliged. This is kind of why I like playing against side starters, because it's easy to, say, calculate a whole game, right? In most positions early on, it's kind of implausible to calculate a whole game. But here, when considering something like 2-6-6-3 and 1, this isn't going to get every sideline, and you should be more specific. But I think it gives a useful through line to go, okay, if I go 2-6-6-3 and 1, probably forces 3, otherwise I'm just grabbing free cards. They have no ups. It's very dangerous for them if I go 3. So 3-3-7, 4 and 3. I play 5-5-2-5 and 4. I set up a plus and 5. If they go somewhere else, looks like I can play said plus and 5 without setting them up, so that's going to be very favorable to me. They should probably block 5. If they block 5 with 3-5-2-7, they have lost all left, so there's no way I'm in any trouble if I just go 7 with decent high to the left. So they should probably block 5 if they're going to do it without capturing, because it's so easy for me to capture back and lock in and keep 3-5-2-7 in their hand. If they go in 5 without capturing, okay, that doesn't set me up in 6. So in general, I should probably go in 6 or 7. Sometimes 9 if there's combo setups, but it's unlikely to have combo setups here. Nothing is like overpowering other things. So I'd probably go 7. Their critical move's probably to take an 8, right? Then they're up 6-4. And the question is, can I take a card making it 5-5 that they can't flip in that endgame? And you can kind of just like calculate the whole game, right? One reason to hold on to 5-5-2-5 here is that 3-7-5-3 currently cannot land in 5, right? I think Seto kind of has to play 3-5-7-1 and 5 if you keep 5-5-2-5, but I think Deli has concluded the same thing I did, is 5-5-2-5 is your worst card moving forward, and you want it out of your hand. I think Deli will play that in 4. And then I would guess Seto will block 5, but Seto's a creative type. I haven't checked 8. Easily could be some kind of weird tool. You know, Seto's a weirdo. Maybe he'll play 9, but 5 seems like the standard way for this game to go. So again, when I say calculate the whole game, I don't mean you got every line. I mean, you got a main line that gives you a good sense of where the strengths and problems in the position might be, right? We learned, okay, they really can't do much by capturing, and if they don't capture, they're going to generally have low numbers facing out we can take. There's generally not going to be many combo setups when 5 is played in by either of us. That's going to block stuff off. The end game is largely going to be about whether 3-7-5-3 or 3-5-7-1 can sweep my remaining cards. Want to try to make sure they don't. You know, things like that. You can learn, and then you can start checking sidelines. You can start saying, okay, if I go 4, do they have any other options? And I'm not saying you have to calculate to the end of the game, but I'm saying with these side starters, these defensive side starters, right? An aggressive side starter where it says you don't have safety in these squares does not imply follow-ups in the same way. But a defensive side starter does. So much earlier in the game, we can kind of go, here is a basic outline of the game. And I suspect the line I've given is basically correct. Okay, Deli is put down 5-5-2-5. So there are choices, right? 3-5-3-6 could go there as well, as could 6-3-5-3. Now, 6-3-5-3 feels like the greatest concession because you don't have a recapture from 7. But Deli only has one card, or Seto only has one card that captures from 5, and there is potentially a play against that, though I don't see it. I don't think there's potentially a play against that. You still might tie them because you have safety in 7, and because Seto only has 3s up, 3-5-3-6 landing in 6 at some point could be safe as well. So, I mean, even there, you're probably doing okay. A part of the reason I like playing how Deli is played here, I like playing next to the corner rather than in a far corner like Seto tends to do, is I like to play two games where I think I can calculate everything. And these are games where I'm much more likely to be able to do so. Now, Seto is a better calculator than me, so, he can go into those positions and be confident of his calculation in a way that I am less so. And Deli can also play far corners more than I do. Obviously, I play them some of the time. I mean, they're just good moves. But I'm saying, like, in a situation where both seem plausible, I do have a preference for this kind of play because I can force the continuation. I can be confident my position is safe and that I have calculated the critical lines to the end and I can't get myself in much trouble. With moves in 7 and 9, you give your opponent much more chance to get in trouble, but yourself too, and I tend to avoid that style of move. So I've been assuming. Can you hear the noise from next door? No. Good. They're cutting bricks. It's very annoying. It makes really annoying smell, air pollution, all that. My friend in construction is annoyed for me that they're not wet cutting the bricks. I don't know what anything means. That's what he said. Also, like, I feel like if you're blasting this much smoke in your face, like, wear a mask, my man. But okay, whatever. Yeah, Seto blocks 5 quite quickly. Note that he blocked 5 with the card that he could have been forced not to block 5 with if Deli had held on to 5-5-2-5, but I don't think this was a serious option. And we can see where the potential problem for Deli is, right? If Deli goes 7, Seto goes 8, and Seto's up 6-4, and 3-5-7-1 does sweep that endgame. So Deli has to be careful here. And why did I not think this was dangerous? This looks very dangerous. I thought this was comfortable. What was I thinking? So there's 6-3-5-3 in 9. It's interesting. It doesn't do much. They just can play 8 and you lose. Okay, did I just calculate this horribly? I was like, but you can barricade 3-7-5-3 at the end because you can make a 5 facing up, but a 5 doesn't stop 3-5-7-1. What was I thinking? I don't know. You have safety in 6, but then Seto plays 7, and you really wish you had 5-5-2-5. Maybe he had to keep 5-5-2-5? 5-5-2-5 seems like the needed card now, right? It stops 3-7-5-3 from landing in 5, but even if it did, it has all kinds of sames that help defend the position, right? It means you could go 6 here, and if they go 7, you have the same with an 8. So I really thought this through badly. Seems like 3-5-3-6 and 4 might have been mandatory. And Deli put this card down. Like, he must have thought this through much better than I did. After I go through this whole thing of, like, pretty straightforward game to calculate, never in doubt, easy to do. No, this is just lost now. Unless I'm, again, missing even more stuff. But, yeah, no, I think this was some of my worst calculation. Apologies for that. I feel like, yeah, I do think, though, this is one of those things of, like, 1 was never as clean in the lines I checked as 3. Like, if you started in 3, I think it's harder to get in trouble. I think it's harder to also get advantages, but I think it's harder to get in trouble. And we can kind of think of it in a parallel way. Like, the game works similarly. You also create a threat in 5, but when you go in 9, right? And here, when Deli goes in 7, Seto has 8 with a 5 facing out. In the other version, when you go in 9, Seto goes 3-7-5-3 and 8 with a 3 facing out. And that's a lot easier to have play against. You also limited more what Seto could put in 5 that way. Like, Seto couldn't put a 7 to the left in 5 because you'd have a plus in 4. Um, yeah, alright, so Deli's saying he did a dumb. Yeah, I did the same dumb, though. I can't blame him. Bad job by both of us. I mean, I can blame him, but I should take just as much blame here. Yeah, bad calculation by me. Wrong card for 4. We can, we can check this, but, again, Seto is the, or not again, but Seto is the worst player to make mistakes against. You just lose. You just have to play perfect. And, yeah, nicely done by Seto. Really surprised, again, that he pulls out a win here. I just did not think this was near as dangerous. Figured everything was ties everywhere. And, yeah, got it totally, totally wrong. If I was the New York Times, I would now not publish this. But I am not our paper of repute, so I will admit to mistakes. I guess, I mean, before publishing it, it's fine not to, but, like, I did the live commentary. Live commentary counts. Yeah, so I think 3, 5, 3, 6, and 4 probably. Um, so in the position after Seto goes in 3, there are no ties in 4. Wow, this was so much more dangerous than I thought. Ties are in 8, 9, and 6. Oh my god, that is scary. How is this so bad? It's those side to side sweepers and then 3, 5, 7, 1 randomly getting the last capture. Alright, so 3, 5, 3, 6, and 4 didn't work. Why not? They just block 5 anyway, this time with 3, 5, 7, 1. You just don't have a hold. Yeah, because a 5 up doesn't work against 3, 7, 5, 3 either, because there's a plus with that 7 down. Oh, this was just. Oh, this was horrible. So would 2, 6, 6, 3 have been any better? Seto now in 3, I mean, that rather than 1. Seto could play 3, 5, 7, 1, and 1. Can you tie in 6 there? There are multiple ties in 6 there. And if Seto plays 3, 3, 7, 4, and 1, multiple ties in 6. Okay. So I think, despite the fact that there still were ties, there weren't in 4. And if there aren't ties in 4, let's go back and tell you where the ties are. After 1 and 3, if there aren't ties in 4, this is a nightmare. There's a tie in 8. I mean, come on. There's a tie in 9. Again, come on. It doesn't even set anything up. Like, how do you play 5, 5, 2, 5, and 9? I don't. Maybe you do, but that seems wild to play on move 4 here. There's a tie in 7. Again, this is really hard to figure out. And there are 2 ties in 6. But I think 6 is a really tough square to play in. But it sort of does the opposite. Like, it sort of switches to if you had played 3. If you go 6, you force them to block 5, and then you can play 9. And as we saw, you really don't want to have to play 4 and 7, because 3, 5, 2, 7 lands in 8. But you can get away with 6 and 9, because 3, 7, 5, 3 doesn't kill you as badly. Really tough position to save. I think the actual critical mistake, then, is going 2, 6, 6, 3, and 1 rather than 3. But, like, they both should work. Jesus. Playing Seto's horrible. This is the worst. Alright, congrats to Seto. He played great. Well done. Deli's defense in the last game was brilliant. Go check that one out. My calculation in this one was horrendous. Pretend you didn't watch this video, and pretend you still have respect for me and Deli. But it is telling we both blew the same calculation here. Both kind of just figured it worked. Even though very linear calculation. So I think actually what happened here was I really screwed up the linear calculation. Deli got here, picked up the card, realized it was bad, spent his time looking for something better, didn't find it because it's almost impossible to find, and then eventually went with the move that seemed best. So I think much more blame on me than on Deli, because this was just a really bad situation where he eventually went with this move. Well, for me, I was like, la-di-da, everything is fine, when in fact the house was burning down around me. Alright, nicely done by Seto. Just playing perfect triple triad and showing that I am completely wrong about the danger facing defensive sides. I do think 2663 and 3 would have led to a much clearer tie, but hard to see at distance how important the 3527 and 3753 would be as sweepers. Because part of the reason I was drawn to 3 rather than 1 was because 6 is a more comfortable setup for 5. But this wasn't really the differentiation. The differentiation was how much are you getting swept by the side sevens, and that is much more difficult to see at range.